record, but then I stopped it immediately. I love how it gives you an option to leave if you don't want to be live streaming.
No.
It's pretty good.
I didn't sign up for this.
Yeah. Fucking bullshit.
And we're online. This intro script is getting longer and longer by the episode. Is everybody good to go?
Good. Yep.
All good.
Cool.
All Gucci.
As the championship lead continues to yo-yo between our two protagonists, F1 is heading to Austin, Texas next weekend to race around the circuit of the Americas. Welcome to the F1 Grid Talk podcast. Today we'll be previewing the 2021 United States Grand Prix. My name is Ruby Price, and joining me we have Tom Horrox from the Monkey Seat podcast.
Hiya.
Hi. Tom Downey from Everything F1 podcast.
Hello.
And Aaron Harper from the Five Red Lights podcast.
Hello.
Hello. Firstly, if you enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'll shout out all of you who do to say thanks. And on that note, every month we're giving away even more Grid Talk merchandise. For the competition 1 to be in the running to win a Grid Talk Champion t-shirt, all you need to do is give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or leave a comment on the YouTube replay with your favourite moment from a race. And to be in the running to win a Grid Talk mug, all you need to do is hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Winners of both competitions for the month of October will be announced during the Mexico Grand Prixview. So, Tom Horrox, the big news this week was the reveal of the calendar for the 2022 season. 23 races, several subject to contracts like Imola in Spain, and the new race in Miami. What are your thoughts on the calendar, and do you think we'll be in for an exciting season?
I think every season of Formula One's exciting, but that's because I'm a geek. But no, it's looking good. I mean, 23 races, not too many triple headers. It seems to be quite front loaded, and then kind of it's quite crammed in towards the end. So that's it's slightly different way of going about it, and I'm glad we're not running so close to Christmas as we have done in the past. So initial thoughts. I mean, yeah, there's some good races, some bad races. Glad to see we've got Imola coming back again. That's quite a good addition. So yeah, overall good. It probably a little bit on the big side, but I can cope with that because at least we've not got like 5 triple headers or anything like that. So initial thoughts, good. I'm happy with it.
Yeah, good. And Aaron, for the first time in almost a decade, the calendar doesn't have Australia set to open the season. Obviously, last year in the current season, we were meant to start in Australia, but due to COVID concerns, that didn't happen. Do you think the slightly later slot in the calendar of the 8th to 10th of April is going to mean that they're ready to host the race this time around?
I hope so, because how many times, like, if you go back to 2017, we had the change of regulations and we turned up in Australia and you could hardly overtake with the new big wings and the stickier tires. So I think that's going to be the first proper test for the new regs compared to what we've got currently, because it's such a fast track. And also we really want to see these changes that they've made to aid the overtaking. So the longer run down to the fast chicane on the other side of the pond, and the run out of the chicane down to, I think is it turn 13, the right-hander at the end of the straight. Where I think they put some banking as well, which would be quite interesting to see the different lines. So we might have some Zandvoort style racing where they're high and low through there, which could then open up opportunities into the final sector. But as a general test of the new regs, I think we really need the Australian Grand Prix to go ahead, because otherwise we're waiting until Spain or maybe even Imola to get a real read on what's happening with the new regs.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, Tom Downey. Next year, we're going to have 2 countries that host 2 separate races in them, with Imola and Monza and Miami and Cota. It will be a good season to be an Italian or an American F1 fan, won't it?
Oh, definitely, and even better if you're an Italian American. Yeah, it's the first time since, oh God, I think we're going back to possibly like the sort of early to mid noughties that multiple countries have hosted 2 Grand Prix. That would be a good quiz question, actually. Yeah, I'm excited to see Imola back. I was a bit skeptical because obviously we had it in 2020 because of when the pandemic sort of really kicked off and everything. I thought it was perhaps going to be a bit of a dud this year, but it was actually good this year as well. And like Aaron mentioned, with the cars perhaps getting not necessarily smaller, but getting perhaps easier to pass and not taking up quite so much physical presence on the track, we could see some really good racing at Imola. Also, Miami, yeah, it'd be nice to see a new street circuit. I wonder if it's going to try and be like the American Monaco. I just hope it doesn't go the way with the Valencia street circuit, where it just sort of fades into oblivion after a while. But it'd be good to see F1 get more exposure in America. As much as I like Cota, it's one of my favorite circuits, actually. Miami, I am a bit skeptical, but that's just me being me.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one of the Grid Talk panelists, Louis Edwards, his initial reaction to the Miami circuit track design was one of wanting to vomit. So, we'll see how it actually is when we see the real circuit itself next year, early in the calendar. But, we'll see next season and if it is actually vomit-inducing. So on to this race weekend, Tom. We're obviously heading to Cota. It's historically been something of a Mercedes track, at least in the turbo hybrid era, with the exception of a Kimi Raikkonen win, I think it was in 2018, his also last race win. We've had 2 Mercedes wins, I think it was. Well, Mercedes powered wins in the last couple of races. No, yeah, 2 Mercedes race wins in the last 2 races. So they're going to be on the front foot, trying to capitalize on that momentum this weekend.
Yeah, and also the other race as well. Before that was a McLaren Mercedes win. So it's been 3 Mercedes power wins in a row. I just had to mention that, McLaren Mercedes winning a race had to be done. Yeah, it has always come across as a bit of a Mercedes stronghold, but given the strength of the Honda engine this year, that's a bit up in the air. However, I do think that Mercedes have made some gains in that department. I think they were a bit taken aback by what Red Bull could do with their power unit at the start of the season, where they made some definite power gains, but on the back of reliability claims. So I think that Mercedes have kind of clocked onto that, and then they've put that through the pipeline themselves, and now they've managed to make some similar gains. So Red Bull complaining about it is basically just what they did at the start of the season. So and I based that on absolutely nothing. That's just opinion. But I do think that Mercedes have definitely made a gain, and they're now potentially the best power unit again, slightly ahead of Honda. I think Red Bull have probably got the best overall package. The peaks of the Red Bull car are higher than the Mercedes, but I think the Mercedes car is just a little bit more drivable, a little bit more consistent. So it's on a knife edge for the rest of this season. We're not going to go a race now without talking about the championship and the repercussions it has, and so it's just teeing everything up nicely, and it's great to see that we're at the Circuit of the Americas, and we're not talking about can Hamilton wrap up the championship in America again. We're actually talking about will it go to the end of the season. So that's great also. So yeah, it's only 3 nationalities have won at COTA as well, so that's interesting as well. Let's see if we can get a 4th this year. Make it maybe a Dutch one. Make it more interesting.
Yeah, opinions on the F1 Chronicle Grid Talk podcast. Who would have ever thought of that? Aaron, sticking with Mercedes and Cota, Valtteri Bottas finally got his first win of the season last time out in Turkey. After what has arguably been a very disappointing season for him, he's finally up in 3rd in the championship, which, Mercedes was obviously wanting to be P2 in the championship, but at least he's now where he should be as an absolute minimum.
Yeah, and I think he can take some confidence from that win, because I draw some similarities from the Istanbul circuit to the COTA circuit. They're not obviously completely alike, but a lot of the characteristics of the corners are fairly similar. And he's got form in Kota because he was the last man to win there. An impressive drive as well. So if he can dig out some of that and take inspiration from his win in Turkey, he could be on for a very good weekend. And Mercedes needing to have a good weekend because Perez will be needing to follow up his result as well. So the race might simply come down to who's number two does the better job. And given recent form in both Texas and in Istanbul, you'd have to put your money on Bottas. He's been freed up by that move to Alpha. He's got the most points of anyone since the announcement of that move. So he's driving like a man liberated of the pressure of dealing with the expectation of championship winning. So that might favor Mercedes because they've got a man who's now just driving completely for himself and completely flat out with almost no regard for the title picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that showed as well in Russia when he just didn't really put up any fight against Max Verstappen. He was just like, I'm racing my own race here. I'm not racing for Mercedes. But Tom, we've just obviously mentioned that it's going to be a battle of the number twos for each team as well. Red Bull obviously had both their drivers on the podium last time out for the first time in quite a while, if memory serves me correct. Sergio Perez with a bit of a fresh spring in his steps from another podium this season. Max Verstappen P2 and back in the championship lead in terms of the Drivers' Championship. Obviously, we've just mentioned that this has been something of a Mercedes circuit in the turbo hybrid era, but with this season, we've seen that sort of form book can just go out of the window. Do you think this is going to be another one of those cases, or is it going to be, everything as normal?
So there's quite a bit to unpick there. Well, first of all, it was really nice to see Perez back on the podium last weekend. It was the first time he's been on the podium, I think, since one of the Austria races. I can't remember if it was the first or the second one. Someone will probably correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that does seem to ring a bell. Like you said, he definitely had a spring in his step. He was pulling off moves left, right, and centre, and more to the point, he was holding back Hamilton. We all saw that fantastic defence around that one lap, and then going down the main straight. I was sort of like watching through the gaps in my fingers at that point because I thought they were going to have a coming together. In terms of how the sort of number two driver role is going to play, I don't think there's going to be as much to play for in terms of the constructors. I think Mercedes have got enough of a stronghold on the constructors that they're going to wrap up the constructors this year. They're about 40 points ahead, I think, at the moment. Maybe a little bit less. But the point is, I'm sure they've got at least like a race victories difference in points. Bottas has scored the most points, I think, out of the top 6 drivers in the championship since he got his Alpha contract. Or there's something like that. He's scored, I think, 59 points since he got that Alpha contract. So that tells you all you need to know about him, and sort of like where his mind is at. He does seem at peace at the moment, if that makes sense. That's not he's going to die. He's not. I should say he's comfortable that he's going to a multi-year deal. The number 2 role of Perez and Bottas is going to be vital in the remaining rounds of this season. Looking at some of the circuits we've got left, if you look at the likes of the Losail track in Qatar, this street circuit we've got coming up in Jeddah, I don't see much overtaking going on. And track position is going to be pretty important on those circuits. And if Verstappen is P1, he is going to need Perez as close as possible behind him, holding up the likes of Hamilton or Bottas or maybe even Norris, anyone who's going to put the championship at risk. And I do think we're possibly going to see some team orders come in for the rest of the season to protect both the drivers and the constructors' championships.
Team orders as well in, Formula One. Also never heard of it before.
Nah, never heard it.
It is a 36 point championship lead in the constructors, if my mental maths is correct, of 433.5 to 397.5. And as Aaron pointed out in our chat, Perez's last podium was Paul Ricard, which seems like a while ago. I can't remember if it actually was or not, but that's just the year that we've been having. So, Tom, on to, your favourite team, McLaren. Still P3 in the championship standings, but that gap to Ferrari has certainly reduced after the last couple of races with, Danny Ricciardo not scoring in the last two, I think it was, and Lando having two P7s in a row.
Yeah, we don't mention what didn't or nearly happened at Russia. I'm still not over that. I'm nervous. I'm not gonna lie. It's Ferrari's new power unit. They've taken the penalties, and they've not had similar to Red Bull. They've not had a huge disadvantage from it. McLaren have been consistent all year. I think Ferrari have generally had the edge, but McLaren just made better of what they have available. And now Ferrari have got a much stronger package overall. I think the track that they've just been at was probably didn't quite suit them in Istanbul the way that it has in other tracks. I think the long sweeping corners don't quite lend themselves to the McLaren philosophy as much. But I don't know the circuit at Qatar that well, but I imagine given it's a bike circuit, it's probably going to be similar to that kind of layout as well. So I worry for them there. Where Mercedes are strong, McLaren should be strong as well. So I'm hoping that they'll hold Ferrari off, but in my thoughts now, Ferrari for me look the favourite for that third place in the championship, and it's just a case of can McLaren hold on, and the final deciding factor on that is going to have to be Daniel Ricciardo. He has to perform. It looked like he'd done a lot better since the summer break, and he kind of went backwards again. So he needs to perform, and he's going to be the linchpin of that championship fight, because the two Ferrari drivers, you can't separate them, but at the moment you can definitely separate the two McLaren drivers. So that's really important that he can perform here at COTA. It's one of his favourite tracks. I'd like to think that he can get on top of the McLaren here. But yeah, it's certainly squeaky bum time for the McLaren. That being said, third and fourth in the championship, I don't think it's going to make a vast difference for McLaren for what their plan is moving forwards and their plan for next year. The fact that they're third, they get pretty much guaranteed fourth in the championship is still okay. It's a step back from last year, but it's not a disaster by any stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. Aaron, sticking with McLaren, Tom touched on it lightly, but what do you reckon their chances are around here this weekend?
I think they're going to be stronger than they were in Istanbul. They, like Tom said, they struggle with the long sweeping corners, and Sector 1 is pretty exclusively long sweeping corners in COTA. So they're going to struggle there, but they've got good straight line speed, and I think the final sector might suit them a little bit better, because obviously they were strong in Monza, and that's tight chicanes and traction zones. So they might do well in that section. They tend to be behind Ferrari in qualifying, so it's going to be, I think, a case of whether they can make the progress through the field as the race develops, or if they get stuck in the lower top 10, because Gasly tends to perform well in qualifying, and if Ferrari get their act together and get both cars ahead of the McLarens, and they pull another strategical qualifying masterclass like they did in Turkey, McLaren could be in a really sticky position. But with the long back straight and the McLaren's overall top speed and efficiency down the straight, they might fancy themselves if they get anywhere near anything else, even if it's a new Ferrari power unit. So it's still all to play for. It's going to be interesting how they attack the weekend, because if they feel like they're lagging behind, they might have to pull something clever on strategy, maybe. I'm not sure you deliberately qualify outside the top 10, but I hope that they did, and then play the strategy on the race day that way, because they tend to go better on Sundays than Saturdays.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since we saw someone deliberately not qualify in the top 10, with giving that free tyre choice that they get in Q3. Not free tyre choice, just an extra tyre. I mean, can you tell that someone is ill and tired? But yeah, Tom, the Ferraris, both had a good weekend last weekend. Carlos Sainz coming through the field to finish P8, Charles Leclerc putting a very strong race in and finishing P4. Sadly, he wasn't able to do Ferrari's strategy of stay ahead of P2 and you will finish P1. But, that's a Ferrari strategy for you. But anyway, what do you reckon their chances are this weekend? Obviously, their last victory here was 2018 with Kimi Raikkonen, but I'd say they've got a much stronger driver pairing this time around, but not the same strength of car.
Yeah, Ferrari have arguably one of the best, if not the best, driver lineups on the grid. I'd say if there's half a point between them, in between the drivers, that is in the championship, and they've both had. I know Sainz has had multiple podiums. Has Leclerc had multiple podiums, or has he just had the one? I'm not sure.
Just the one for sure.
It is just the one, yeah. But in terms of how they're going to go this weekend, if it is going to be like a Mercedes PU dominated track, or that's what sort of history tells us. Obviously, the Honda units in the past haven't been, the force to be reckoned with that they are this year. But I don't think we'll see. We might see one of them sneaking to the top 10. As to which one would sneak into the top 10, you just have to roll a dice on that one, because there's not really much between them. But I don't think they're going to go as well this weekend. But I said that I said that for Turkey, and look how well that went. They might sort of like be on the cusp of the points if they get perhaps a bit of luck with a safety car, if there's an incident, or if one of them gets an absolute demon start or something and absolutely Kobe's it at the inside. Then they might have they might sort of like almost luck into a position. But with regards to it being on merit, I'm not as confident.
Yeah. Tom, the Alpines had a very disappointing race weekend last time out with Alonso in P16 and Ocon P10. It's at least 1 point, but it is 1 point, and they are a team who seem to be, all over the place when it comes to wherever they're going to finish. So the form book's sort of out of the question. But, where do you see them being this weekend, if it's even possible to predict?
It's the most unpredictable team on the grid, without a shadow of a doubt. You don't know if they're going to be fighting for a podium or being knocked out in Q1. I think their championship position is slightly inflated. They're not as fast as AlphaTauri. They are faster than Aston Martin. But again, similar to the Red Bull, they're a little bit peaky. I think they're obviously their position is inflated by the fact they have got that win for Esteban Ocon. Alonso is still ahead of him in the championship. That tells you a story as well. It's very, very difficult to tell. I think based on what we've seen before from them, I think they'll be in the mix. They'll probably be in the mix with the AlphaTauris, obviously nowhere near the Ferraris and McLarens. I haven't seen a weather report for the weekend. They do tend to look like they go better in bad conditions until Fernando Alonso tries to do something around the outside in turn one. But it's I think the drivers seem to be, not so much Ocon, but Alonso seems to be coming on now. He's definitely back to his best, and trying to push forward, trying to get that first podium in 5 years or whatever it is now. He's obviously going to want to be trying to do that, but I don't think this is going to be the track for them. I think they'll be close, but I think it's going to take some more strange conditions for them to be fighting for a podium. I think the fight for them now is to try and maintain that fifth place in the championship, which they could do. 12 points is not a massive points haul for AlphaTauri to fight back, but I think they've got a chance of holding on against AlphaTauri, but I think the overall package for AlphaTauri is better. But you just look at their second driver and you think, well, that maybe that's not gonna work. But so overall, Alpine looking again just unbelievably unpredictable, really. So very difficult to say for certain where they're going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Very unpredictable. And, it will help if their driver doesn't keep getting 5-second time penalties for spinning around the cars that are normally spinning anyway. Just leave them alone, Fernando. They'll do it themselves. Aaron, the AlphaTauris, as Tom has mentioned, seem to be faster than the car that is ahead of them in the championship. But, with Pierre Gasly, Mr. Consistent, either in 6th or 13th, it could be anything, but Tsunoda is just not consistent in the sense that he's just not performing that well, it seems. But what do you reckon this weekend? Are they going to, make some grounds on P5 or stay where they are?
Well, I think they can make some ground. It's 12 points, the gap. So that is a 4th place, I believe. So if things go a bit crazy and the two Alpines get collected in an accident, then it's all to play for AlphaTauri. They could still take back that 5th place. Gasly has been fast pretty much everywhere this year, so it wouldn't be a surprise to me to see him in the top 6 in qualifying, and then definitely in the points come race day. He's kind of my one to watch for qualifying because, like you say, he's either top 6 or he's middle of the midfield. As for Tsunoda, he is consistently inconsistent, but he's brought out like 4 or 5 red flags this season. He'll do well to bring one out this weekend because there's a lot of space around the track, but I don't see him scoring points, and which is a shame because he drove well for the most part in Turkey, and he could do with a good solid point scoring finish, but then he could also do with just keeping it pointing the right way for the entire weekend and putting a lot of solid laps in. Hard to say how they'll fare because Gasly does have a tendency sometimes to get involved in not necessarily wheel banging, but as we saw in the sprint race in Monza and in Bahrain, he knocked off his front wing when he really, really shouldn't have. So it's a pinch point at turn 1. If he's anywhere around the top 6 or in the midfield, he might need to just tread carefully there to keep his longer term prospects for the race alive. But then I still think he could come back through and pick up some points even from there. So it'd be interesting to watch their progress.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, sticking on Pierre Gasly and pinch points at turn 1, obviously last race weekend, he did get that 5-second penalty for, I think it was forcing Alonso off the track, or at least colliding with him. It wasn't forcing him off the track. Where do you think, did you agree with the steward's decision to lay the blame on Pierre Gasly there, or
Nope.
were you more of the it was a racing incident, let them race into the first lap?
I thought that was a racing incident. It was 3-1, and Gasly, yes, he did get squeezed, but where is he supposed to go in that situation? He was also on the racing line, so the fact that Alonso tried to go effectively around the outside, Alonso is putting his car in a position where he is always vulnerable to getting pinched, especially on lap 1 on a greasy track when they're all on intermediates and the track is still somewhat wet. I also thought that F1 they're supposed to be sort of more lenient on laps 1 through to about maybe 3, due to the nature of the cars are being bunched up as the race starts. So I was a bit surprised to see a penalty for that, and then I thought that was going to set a precedent for the race, and then not seeing 1 or 2 other incidents get penalised, notably I almost expected to see a penalty for someone in the Perez-Hamilton incident when Hamilton pushed Perez pretty wide and Perez went across the pit lane. Given they penalised Gasly for that, I was expecting to see a penalty for that. So I'm a little bit confused as to why common sense prevailed for that Perez one, because there was nowhere he could go when Gasly got a penalty when he was on the racing line and there was nowhere he could go. So I don't know. I'm not an F1 steward, evidently. I'm just a nerd who watches at home. But it just smacks of inconsistency to me in the stewarding decisions. Yeah, it just, sorry, I got something in my eye as well. It just to me, that just wasn't a penalty. And some of the other things that have been let go, not just in the Turkey race, but this season, and then conversely, some things that have been penalised but should have been let go, they're not doing themselves any favours, the stewards. And
I'm sorry, Tom, you're asking for the impossible.
Well, I know, yeah.
From the stewards.
Stewards, how dare I? I know, and I tell you what, I think part of the problem with this is we don't have the same stewards week in, week out. So a different steward is going to have a different view on something. So if we would have had, I can't remember who was on the stewards for the Turkey race, but say, for example, we'd have had a steward who more or less always errs on the side of a racing incident, there's a good chance that Gasly wouldn't have been penalised for that. So there's inconsistency in that in itself, but that's probably another whole podcast in itself as well.
There could definitely be an F1 Chronicle Grid Talk Stewards Room podcast going on for all of the things that we've always had to talk about. But without a 5-second penalty for Gasly, he potentially could have even been in P4 after.
I do think he'd have been ahead of Hamilton, because he was pretty close, even without sort of factoring in the 5-second penalty. So who knows? It's a shame for him because he had a really, really good weekend.
He did. Tom, the Aston Martin, the next one to talk about, Vettel will absolutely be hoping for a good result after what was definitely a bit of a wasted weekend after deciding to go into some slicks in very damp conditions. Where do you see him being able to bounce back in that also very inconsistent car?
I hear he's ordered snow tyres for Austin this year, as he feels that's a good choice to go on to. Yeah, baffling strategy. It really was. He tends to run pretty well at Austin, so I'm hoping he has a better race. But just the Astons are just so inconsistent at the moment. They've had a 5th, a 7th, and a 9th in the last 6 races. So out of 12 finishes, 3 points finishes. That's not the form of the people, what's supposed to be sort of the 5th fastest car on the grid. They should be doing a lot better than that. And Lance Stroll is being just average, just hanging around that 10th, 11th, 12th range for the races. And Vettel is sometimes getting ahead of that, but then just throwing it away or just completely disappearing in races. So this, I think I'm really hoping for Aston Martin's sake that they are just shelving development of this car and focusing purely on 2022. Because if this is them taking the fight to the 2021 season like they were saying they were going to do, then I fear for them next season, because it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere near the right direction at all. The car doesn't seem to be getting better; it seems to be getting worse, if anything. And a big gap ahead, to AlphaTauri and Aston Martin. And who'd have thought that there'd have been their next nearest challengers would have been Williams at the start of the season? I certainly wouldn't have picked that. It's say with 6 races to go and only 3 points finishes in the last 6. I can't see it getting much better for them. I really want Vettel at least to have a nice box office result this season. He's had it taken away from him. I know he had the podium in Baku, but he had the second place taken away from him, and it'd be good to see him up on the podium again between now and the end of the season. It's going to be difficult for that car to get anywhere, to be honest, because it just doesn't look like it's. I mean, annoyingly on camera, it looks like a Mercedes, which just confuses me quite a lot. But it's just one of those annoying also rans at the moment that occasionally gets into the points, and that's not where Aston Martin should be. And I think heads may roll at the end of the season if things don't at least look like they're going to improve.
Well, if the rumours are true, the Mercedes might be driving around with the traditional silver paint again next season. So we will see if it looks like an Aston Martin again next season, or if Aston Martin decide to go for silver because, what they're like with the Mercedes team, Tracing Point being one of those things. But Aaron, the Williams Mercedes, sadly, Turkey took away that point scoring, run that George Russell had been on with his P15, Latifi and P17. But other than that blip, they have been very strong over the last couple of race weekends. Obviously, with cars, sometimes it was more of a case of cars ahead not performing where they should be, but occasionally it was points on merit.
Yeah, and it was a really good run for them. That was thoroughly unexpected, I would say, because I don't think at the start of the season anyone would have ever said Williams will go through a run where they've scored 4 points finishes in 5 races, and one of them would be a podium. So it was a bit of a bump down to earth for them, but that's kind of where they are at the moment. And wasn't like that George got dropped to 15th and was there on his own. He was in contention with the cars around him. I know they're all managing their intermediates into semi-slicks and whatever, but again, like you said, he was there on merit. And I think, but for the spin for Latifi on the opening lap, I think he would have been somewhere around there too. And in fairness, the only two cars that got in front of George were cars that would normally have gone past anyway and would have qualified ahead of him in normal circumstances. So I think this could be a good weekend for Williams, and whether you classify a good weekend as points or just, again, finishing ahead of Alfa Romeo and Haas and making sure that they don't steal a few points on you for whatever reason. But it could also be tricky because of the elevation changes. You could be prone to gusty winds, especially into turn one. We saw George spin at the final corner in Turkey in qualifying. And they've said all season that the car is susceptible to gusts of wind catching them out because of the peaky downforce. So it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. I think over one lap, again, they'll have a good chance of perhaps sneaking George into Q3 and perhaps getting Nicholas into Q2. But unfortunately, I don't see them picking up any points because they probably won't have quite enough, even with the Mercedes power unit, to hold that position higher up the order when you've got the likes of Aston Martin and maybe an AlphaTauri and an Alpine trying to fight through. But it could be quite fun seeing George and Nicholas perhaps in that fight and see how they deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, sticking with Williams, do you think we could see another Q3 appearance from George tomorrow, next the actual qualifying, or do you think that this is going to be one of those circuits where it does just highlight a lot of the flaws of the Williams and they are out in either Q2 or Q1?
I as much as part of me really wants to see a Williams in Q3, if I saw both, I'd probably absolutely lose my mind, but it's not going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen this weekend. We've had this sort of circuits which have really suited the Williams for Q3, and as good as a driver as Russell is in that car, I think it would be asking almost a bit too much of him to get it into Q3. I think Russell will get it into Q2 because I think Tsunoda will be back to business as usual and go out in Q1, sort of like as per. And Russell, he might get sort of about P13, P12 in qualifying. But yeah, I think anything else above that would be a real sort of like, not a shock, but it'd be like exceeding, not expectations, but
exceeding the realms of reality.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to say, but it's I think around sort of P13, maybe P12, in Q2, and Latifi might go out edge of Q1. He might sneak it into Q2, but realistically, I think he's going to go out. He's going to go out at the top of Q1.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, the Alfa Romeos, your favorite team that aren't called McLaren. Last time out, there was a bit of a team orders furor with Giovinazzi ignoring orders to let Kimi through. And in the end, it was P11 and P12 for them when it potentially could have been points for at least one of them. But does that tell you that Antonio is leaving the team at the end of the season?
Yeah, absolutely. It was an absolutely shocker for Alfa Romeo last time out. When there's actually a little bit of positivity surrounding the team at the moment, given that they've got Bottas in for next year, the second seat is up in the air. I would be very surprised if it's Giovinazzi. With the potential Andretti takeover, maybe Colton Herta coming over. It won't be for next season because he hasn't got the super license points, but I'd be very surprised if they manage to wangle him in. But potential of like Colton Herta joining that team for at least in P1 sessions next year, and there's actually a really nice air of positivity around that team at the moment, and looking like there might actually be something in the future for them rather than just making up the numbers and being a test bed for Ferrari. But then they have a performance like they had at the weekend, and I can't wait for Kimi Raikkonen to retire. He's annoying me more and more every week, and his antics on the radio in the last race. You think about that. You think whenever you hear a radio broadcast like that, and you think, if Lewis Hamilton said that, what would the reaction be? And equally, if if Kimi Raikkonen, if Hamilton says something on the radio, think to yourself, if Kimi said that, what would you say? And most people would be, oh, that's just Kimi being Kimi. So there's the radio antics. There was the whole thing with the team orders, and then the fact that Giovinazzi didn't let his teammate through cost them at least 1 point, and it's just bad form all round. Just the whole operation just needs a massive overhaul. So if Andretti does buy into it, I think he realises he's got a lot to work on and needs to make a lot of improvements to that outfit. As hopes for this weekend, they've got a past winner in that team, so who knows? Because Kimi's clearly as fast as he's always been. I jest, he's not. So it's I mean, I can't say that they'll do anything particular. I'm trying to come up with something positive for them for this weekend, but I can't see it. The only thing I can think is that there are 6 drivers on this grid that didn't drive here last time we were here, and there's 4 people that have never raced here in any formula. So, and given that both their drivers have got experience at this track, that could put them up the order a little bit. That's the only hope I can really see for them this weekend. Again, I haven't seen the weather forecast, so I don't know if that's going to play havoc with anything. I know that the weather can be a bit strange in Austin sometimes, but odds are it's probably going to be a dry race. They seem to be sorting out the bumps apparently. I know it was quite bumpy last time we were here, so that's hopefully give it a bit more of a consistent track surface as well. But no, there's not really. I mean, they're not going to catch Williams. Haas are very unlikely to score, but the odd freak result, they could end up finding themselves at the back of the pack, which would be an absolute disaster for the team. But it's just kind of like holding pattern, get through the last 6 races, try not to embarrass themselves too much, and then try again next year. That's it, really, for Alpha.
I don't know what you're saying, Tom. Kimi's my outside favourite for the win.
Really? Okay.
No. Aaron, the last team on the grid, the Haas Ferraris, 19th and 20th last time out, although, there was the potential for Schumacher to maybe finish a little bit higher than that before he was, spinning like it was Turkey last year. But yeah, is it going to be 19th and 20th for the slowest car on the grid, or is it going to be something surprising?
Well, my notes have got 4 words, and they will be last. It's just the way it is for Haas this year. They'll just be there. I mean, Mick might be able to pull something special out of the bag in qualifying, and they might be spared all of the back row if someone fails in Q1 and has a crash or something. But they're going to need to be extremely lucky to get anything, because this is a circuit that Sector 1 is going to reward downforce and change of direction. Sector 2 is going to reward efficiency and lack of drag. Sector 3 is going to reward traction and stability. And they have none of them. So they're kind of up the creek without a paddle. It's going to be a tough weekend. Expect to see Mazepin spin multiple times. And there may be even the shady move across the straight at some point from him as well. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the race leader or if it's his teammate. He takes no prisoners. So it's gonna be rough for Haas on home soil, which, that's probably not going to be doing the American fan base any favors at all. There might be a lot of Andretti flags out this weekend.
Home soil? I thought that was Russia.
Oh, sorry. Yes, adopted home soil.
Yeah. So that is the grid at least. Let's make some predictions for this race weekend. So I'm going to start with Tom Downey. I have to specify because this is the first time we've had Tom.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so your race winner for this weekend, please.
Verstappen.
Verstappen?
Yep.
Verstappen. Other Tom, your race winner for this weekend, please.
I'm going to be boring and go with Hamilton. He's won 5 out of the last 6 races here, so why not make it 6?
Yeah. Aaron?
I'm going to join Tom H in going with Hamilton, because it's just such a happy hunting ground for him. And I think it's going to play not quite a lot, but slightly more to the Mercedes strengths. I think they're going to be just quick enough through the fast corners and down the straights before the final sector is slightly more Red Bull territory. And I think track position might be quite important in getting that gap through the first sector to hold that track position.
Yeah, I think that so long as Mercedes don't also give Lewis another fresh engine component and a 10-place grid drop, it will also be Lewis on the top step. But if they do, for the sake of hedging my bets, because of how early we are actually recording this episode, Bottas is my other potential race winner, I think, just based on form and last year as well. Tom Downey, the rest of your podium, please.
We'll definitely have Hamilton on the podium, I think. And, like you said, unless he takes another engine penalty of some kind, but I really cannot see Mercedes risking that. If they were going to do it, they'd have just chucked the whole lot in Turkey, I think. So realistically, Hamilton, if he doesn't get P1. And third, I think Bottas is going to carry some momentum because I do think the two Mercs are going to finish ahead of the two Red Bulls as an overall package. So I do think we'll see a Verhambot podium.
Verhambot, yeah. Tom, the rest of your podium, please.
I've got the predictable Verstappen in second, and I think with a glorious return to form, Bottas will be nowhere to be seen. And I think the last spot on the podium will be taken up through gritted teeth by Charles Leclerc.
I was expecting a Norris to come up in that sentence. Aaron, the rest of your podium, please.
I'm going to go for Bottas in second. I think because Bottas has been freed up and he's on a bit of a roll now, there may be some team orders from Mercedes to switch Hamilton and Bottas around. I think, as I said before, the Mercedes is going to be slightly better, and Bottas is the man in form at the moment. And then they're going to finish just ahead of Max in P3 with Perez maybe 5th or 6th, perhaps.
I think you've got to remember that Bottas actually has to listen to the team orders in order for them to switch around. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense. The rest of my podium is going to be Max P2, which would make it down to a 1-point lead in the championship for Lewis, and Valtteri P3. I think, even though I said that if Lewis takes the engine penalty, he'll be P1. So, all of it makes no sense logically, but bold predictions. Tom Downey, your bold prediction for this weekend, please.
Schumacher into Q2.
Well, when you said Tsunoda into Q2, it actually happened. So Schumacher into Q2.
I know.
You're trying to get the stars to align there. Tom, your bold prediction, please.
After my massive rant about them, I'm going to say points for Kimi.
Points for Kimi. I mean, if it's a bold prediction, you're saying it's probably not going to happen. So.
Exactly. Well, it's his last. It's obviously the site of his last Grand Prix victory, which will be the last Grand Prix victory in his career, and I think it'll also be the place of his last point scoring as well.
It'll be very poetic. Aaron, your bold prediction, please.
Gasly top 4 in qualifying.
Yeah, I could see it.
I think there's some definite possibility, but what if McLaren and Ferrari get their act together and put their cars ahead of him?
Yeah, I'm gonna do a George House and say Russell for points. Get that streak going again. It could happen.
That's not bold anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say
it kind of is. We've just said that this is not going to be a Williams circuit.
In before he wins it.
That would only happen if the race actually gets rained off to the same extent that Spa didn't happen.
Well, there's a bit of a trend here. Last time I was on a preview show, the race got rained off.
Let's not.
Let's not go there.
Let's not.
Anyway, with the predictions made for this race weekend, it's now my opportunity. Well, it's now my turn to give you guys an opportunity to promote. So, Tom Downey, you're from the Everything F1 podcast. Please give us an elevator pitch for the Everything F1 podcast.
Yes, so we are Everything F1. We have a Facebook page, Twitter page, basically any place where you use a handle is at Join EF1. We then have a Facebook group, which is ever growing. I think we're on about 7,000 members at the moment, which is the Everything F1 Paddock. We also have a website, which I still need to give a facelift to, which is everythingf1.com. And we have a new YouTube channel where we're doing sort of circuit guides, sort of like looking forward to weekends that are coming up. And then also some of our more savvy sort of like media creation team members are creating sort of like virtual circuit guides with using the F1 games, which is quite interesting. And also we have a podcast, which is the Everything F1 podcast, and we have some pretty good guests on as well.
Very nice. Everyone go and check out the Everything F1 podcast. And Tom Horrox, you're from the Monkey Seat podcast, as anyone watching can see. An elevator pitch from you, please.
Yeah, can't resist a chance for a plug. Got to get it up there. Yeah, so we are at Monkey Seat Pod on the socials. monkeyseatpod.com is the website, which probably does need a facelift as well, actually, Tom. So when you're done with that one, if you want to do mine, that'll be great. Yeah, so we cover all motorsport. We do a bit of IndyCar, Formula 2, Formula 3 as well. Talk about W Series and Extreme E. It's myself and Carl. It's a bit more laid back, bit more banter driven, much less professional than this podcast. So if you fancy cover just having a laugh and debating who is the idiot in the paddock and all that kind of stuff, then come and give us a listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And Aaron, Five Lights podcast, tell us a bit about that, please.
So you can find the Five Red Lights podcast on YouTube. Switching to going live with most of my stuff because it's now easier to do that with my work restraints on time. I'm also on Twitter at 5_red_lights. Unfortunately, I can't put that around my head like Tom has managed to do with his. So you'll just have to trust me on that one. I did have a website, but I didn't have the time to put any energy into it, so I've had to take that away. So it's all just on YouTube. Search 5 Red Lights on there, and hope to see people there soon.
Very nice. Just wait until Tom puts like some form of cat hoodie with Monkey Seat podcast on, so that every time it pops up, it'll just be like, hey, it's a cat. Hey, it's a, what does it say? Monkey Seat podcast. Cool. Yeah. And this is currently my main thing. So, if people want to follow me whilst also following Grid Talk, my Twitter handle is at Rubes, RUUBEZ. It'd be nice to get a follow and have a nice conversation with anyone that's actually listening to us. So, yeah, that is the show. Grid Talk is available on Amazon as well as YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Music, Verbal, Omni Studio, and Pocket Casts. Just search F1 Grid Talk. There's a huge back catalogue of shows with previews and reactions to the qualifying and race results. We are on Reddit. Search for the subreddit F1 Grid Talk. And we also have a Patreon for mics, lights, and better recording equipment. You can get your hands on some official Grid Talk merchandise on the newly working store, which you can find at f1chronicle.com/store. And don't forget about our 2 competitions as mentioned earlier. Also, make sure you subscribe to be the first to know when each new episode is released. We'll be back at the weekend to review the results from the United States Grand Prix. Thank you very much to everyone for joining me.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for listening. We'll be sticking around on YouTube for a little bit, but other than that, goodbye. Yeah, so a couple of comments from Anto Catch, expecting Lewis and Bottas to be first and second in Kota. And also the Gasly thing was a racing incident. Yeah.
Yeah, it was certainly a racing incident.
It was a racing incident.
Yeah.
There's no two ways about that because it's the start of the. How often do you see people just tag each other? It's just the way things work, and the way that corner is, it's going downhill, so they're always going to understeer.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to apply the same logic to what happened, Max would have got a 5-second penalty in Imola for pushing Lewis off the track.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're the
work
2
like that,
championship protagonists. They want to keep the fight going at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think there was a really good episode of Beyond the Grid podcast a few weeks back. I don't know if anyone caught it. I forget the guy's name, but it was a guy who is now on the stewarding panel. He's an ex-race driver.
Was it Pirro?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that was a really good episode to listen to, and even though Tom Clarkson does my head in, it's a really good podcast to listen to, and he talks about how the stewarding works, and it kind of opened my eyes a little bit to more about it, and they do have a small group of people. Yes, it's not always the same, but it is only a group of like 6 or 7 people, and it's 4 of them that are always in attendance, and the others are always like on the end of the phone if need be, if there's a if there's a query and for consistency and everything like that. But he talks a good game, but I do agree that the consistency doesn't appear to be there. And it does annoy me a little bit when you've got certain Spanish drivers shouting their mouth off about certain things when they haven't received a sporting penalty since they returned to Formula One. No prize for guessing who I'm talking about. And then yeah, and especially when the fact that he's saying about this on the back of getting away with something as well. It's just like such a contradiction, and the fact that he was bad mouthing all this lot about the stewards. I feel that they won't admit to it, but perhaps subconsciously they've given the penalty to Fernando because in favour of Fernando because they didn't want to be seen to be victimising him, and then as a result they then had to give Fernando a penalty for the one with Mick, which he should have done anyway. And then later on, again, kind of reverting to type with the with the Perez situation being pushed into the pit lane. Well, I said, well, we can't give a penalty for that. This is getting stupid now. So I think a little bit of referee syndrome where the players all surround the referee and then they get biased into a decision unintentionally. I think there's some unconscious bias in there, which is not intentional. I think the stewards do a great job. I mean, I used to be a referee myself, and being a referee is an impossible job, and there's so much going on. They will never capture everything. So I've been quite critical of stewards in the past, but I understand why it's such a difficult job, but it does annoy me when you do have these elements of inconsistency. So, yeah, frustrating.
Yeah, you'd hate to be one, but like you've got to respect the things that they do when they do, nail it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But some things are obvious. That's the problem. They're missing the obvious ones.
Yeah. But one thing I did find really interesting with that episode of Beyond the Grid was the fact that Pirro got loads of stick about the whole Vettel penalty in Canada in 2019 with Lewis when he got the 5-second penalty, and he still maintains today that was the right decision. I'm like, thank you, because I've always maintained that was the right decision, and that's the one thing that I do agree with. But that I like that, but yeah, a lot of the stuff it just frustrates me that the stuff that they're penalising for. I believe he did say actually that the first lap thing about being more lenient on the first lap, that's kind of a bit of a thing of the past now. They don't. That's kind of been quashed now. It's a bit of a it's a bit of an old wives' tale. That was kind of it was a bit of an unwritten rule before, but now it's kind of like it's gone now. So they're not really applying that rule anymore.
Yeah, it did sort of like just allow people to just sort of take the piss when it came to first lap incidents, because they were just allowing if you are saying that you're going to be lenient, you've got that opportunity to go for those moves that you probably wouldn't do without it.
I'm going to have to dash as well, I'm afraid.
No worries, Tom.
No worries, Tom.
Lovely. Right.
Tom.
I know.
Thank you very much.
See you, boo.
Love you.
Cheers.
YouTube are wondering what the hell's going on now.
I'll leave you explain that one. I got to go.
Yeah.
Ta-da.
Bye.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Forever in our hearts.
Pray for Tom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
Not really. Other than Vettel Spinella from Antocatch and Prix, which I think came at the time when Tom said that he couldn't wait for Kimi to retire.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. But just the F1 news that's currently just poking its way at the side of this Zoom call. I don't think it's breaking, but Research is basically saying that Alfa Romeo are not in a rush to name the Bottas his teammate for 2022.
Maybe that's because Mr. Andretti wants to have a say in it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
my
I
point
see
is
that.
just there's no need to rush. Just wait until you see who's got the best, season.
But it's the only way that Alfa Romeo are ever going to be popular, isn't it? Because everyone's going to want that seat because it's the only seat left. And they should at least wait until the end of the season in Formula 2 because Oscar Piastri is clearly the if it was just done on talent, Piastri would be the one you'd be looking at. But there's the finance that Zhou brings, and obviously the markets that would open up in China. I don't think he's got 4 seasons in F2 and he's still not managed to blow them away. With that much experience, he should be blowing them away this year. So I think if you can't at least be competitive in F2 in your first season, then you haven't got the skills to make it in Formula 1, in my opinion, unless you're, the circumstances around that. But so Piastri looks like the one. Pourchaire looks like he's got amazing potential as well. Too soon for Formula 1 for me, but even though he would have the super license points, I think he needs to come second or third this year, and then he'd have the super license points. So he would have a super license, but it's probably still too soon for him. And then there's there's other options as well. Nick De Vries I know has been linked, but why not wait and see? You don't need to jump into it just because Nick De Vries has won the Formula E Championship. You don't have to throw him in a car straight away. If he doesn't want to wait for Formula 1, then there's no big loss. There's someone else waiting to take that spot. So, absolutely no need to wait at all for the Alfa Romeo seat.
I think as well
no need to rush.
Say again, sorry?
You mean no need to rush, not no need to wait?
Is that what I said?
Yeah.
Okay, no need to rush, yeah.
I think as well with the Guan Yu Zhou situation, like you said about the Chinese markets, there won't be much benefit from it because there's no China race next year. So the exposure they'd get from having a Chinese driver in the Chinese Grand Prix will be, taken away. But obviously having a Chinese driver on the grid, then the knock-on effect could still be limited from that because they don't get the exposure of being in China.
Maybe Alfa Romeo want to sell a lot of cars in China. Who knows? Or maybe they've got a deal with China for all the bits in their car, which is why it keeps breaking down. They've got Chinese versions of everything. They bought off Wish.
No, that's where Haas's car came from, isn't it?
Oh right, yeah.
Wish it was the whole thing, wasn't it?
Wish it was faster.
Wish it was faster.
That's their new slogan for 2022.
Yeah, it would be brilliant if that was their sponsor for next year, wouldn't it?
Your Alkali Wish F1 team.
Not that I actually want one of their drivers to do well, but at least what we know is that they can't use this year's car again next year.
Yeah.
Because, it's obviously the complete change in philosophies.
Yeah. Well, the thing is as well, I'm in two minds about this because obviously nobody likes Mazepin, and there's reasons for that, but I kind of want him to be in a more competitive car because that either make or break his career. Because at the moment there's the excuse of the car I'm in's a shed. That's the reason I'm at the back. If he's in a more competitive car and he's racing with other people, he's going to get into more trouble with people because he's racing them, and then he'll either be banned or he'll have to sort himself out, and he'll prove that he actually has got talent. So I want to see him in a more competitive car next year, so we don't have this stupid situation of I would be better if I was in a better car and all that. So I actually want Haas to be part of the midfield race. So you've got that midfield running all the way to the back, and so it's a fight between. You're going to have some people stealing a march and being out front. That's going to happen because it's a complete change in regulations. But I'd like it to be that everyone sort of from sort of fourth back are fighting with each other. So you've got like a leading pack and then everyone else, rather than having cars at the back every week. That'd be nice. So it is literally a fight from last up to about 10th. That'd be great because then anyone could get points.
And
it would also make
time,
Q1 interesting.
People don't like me because Twitter told them not to.
Q1 will become a challenge as well then, because the top teams, if they get it wrong, then they're starting 16th at best, rather than we can just breeze through Q1 on the mediums, and then we can just do runs on the softs until the end. And at worst, if we get it wrong, we're starting 15th or 11th.
So we just used our mediums.
Yeah. That always surprises me. Why, if there's a race where they're definitely going to be starting on the soft tyre, why they don't use the mediums in Q1? They never really use them. They always use the softs. And I think, why not give yourself an extra soft for later on?
Because they used to do that, didn't they? Like way back in
way back when it first started, yeah. But they haven't seemed to do it for years.
Yeah.
I think since they brought in the Q2 rule, where the tyres you finish Q2 in is the ones you start the race in. But I mean, it just seems odd that if you're going to be starting, if you know you're going to be starting on the soft tyres, why not use the mediums in Q1 if you've got the pace?
Yeah.
But I guess, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they obviously know what they're doing more than I do, but it's just.
You think so?
Yeah.
Not Ferrari.
No. their strategy choices are pretty.
It's just a lucky dip with them, isn't it?
Yeah. They've got a tombola of strategies and just roll it around. Right, what are we doing this week? It always seems to be give Carlos Sainz the crazy strategy and just see what you can do with it. And then we'll give Charles Leclerc the optimum.
Which is stay ahead of P2 to finish P1.
That was just...
The only
anyway.
Yeah. The only thing I can put that down to is Charles had no idea what position he was in.
Well, it's like the way the engineer said it as well. It's almost like he was delivering this amazing thing that this amazing motivational speech that he'd been working on for months. It was like the way he delivered it. It was just like, yes, well, if you stay ahead of P2, P1. I was like, shut up.
Like, I feel like Charles was like asking a genuine question just based off like,
yeah,
where am I going to finish?
Yeah, what he meant was
this race.
Yeah, what he meant was at this pace, where am I likely to finish? It was a genuine question because like if Lewis had asked that question, then the team probably would have said probably P6 or P7. Oh, okay, that's pit then. That's probably what the conversation would have been. But no, they just yeah. Of course he's going to win if he stays in first. Idiots. Oh God, Ferrari annoy me.
Everady Motorsport says that Aaron is spot on about Ferrari's strategy plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely spot on.
The only other real news that I actually saw was Williams saying that they were going to be like aiming to be travel neutral or environmental neutral by 2030.
Well, looking at that calendar for next year, it does look like it's a bit more planet conscious.
Because... I mean, you've got several races in America.
You've got 3 separate trips to America.
But
yeah, but I mean, you look at the start of the season, and you've got Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Australia. I mean, yeah, you'll be making a separate trip to Australia, but a double header in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, and then okay, yeah, fair enough. You've then got Imola, then to Miami, but then back into Europe. It seems a little bit more. And then later on as well, you've got the American races happening at the same time. You've got Singapore and Suzuka as a double header, and Russia, Sochi. I'm not actually geographically sure where Sochi is, what side of Russia that is.
It's on the west side. One. Yeah, it's right on the coast of the Black Sea, so it's closer to Europe than everywhere else in Russia.
Yeah, so that's not massively conducive then.
As Crofty would say, it's in Europe and Asia.
Oh, of course, yes, he said that.
So is Turkey.
Yeah,
because of the Bosphorus.
Yeah.
I think they could pair up Montreal and Miami, because through the pandemic, like with Turkey, the last couple of years, it's kind of been out of season. Usually now we're in Asia, where it's still kind of summertime there, and we've had a couple of wet races in Turkey. Although that's partially in Turkey. Thanks, Crofty. What if you moved Canada to the start of May and had like a really cold race in Montreal? That we really might need the snow tires then. That would be quite interesting.
I think it's when it comes down to circuit availability as well. They can't just say, well, move you there, move you there, move you there. I think during the pandemic it was easier because they could literally just move stuff around because nobody was doing anything because they couldn't. Yeah. But I think it comes down to scheduling commitments as well. And there's certain times of the year where stuff has to happen. And I know Silverstone are pretty inflexible on when they can do a Grand Prix. Monaco, completely inflexible. There's only one date they can do. So
yeah.
Although they can change the weekend format.
Yeah, finally, good. Good. I don't like the Thursday thing. I don't see the point in it. But
wasn't it always based off there being a bank holiday on that Friday?
It was, but not for a very long time. It just became tradition and another thing to stick in the Monaco crown of, oh look, aren't we different? Yes, you are. You're very different, and not in a good way.
I mean, it is a nightmare on the F1 game. If they could ever get rid of Monaco,
I
please.
do a reduced season just because, like, taking off Monaco
Yeah.
and, well, I'm still playing F1 2020, so Vietnam and Singapore. And
I
then,
actually quite enjoy racing Monaco, but then I just turned damage off for that one race.
Damage off
I've turned
5 laps.
flashbacks off.
I did once complete a. I'm not a big gamer. I haven't touched my PlayStation in about 5 months, but I did once do a full race distance at Monaco in the rain, just for fun.
It's my idea of torture.
That's like a YouTube challenge,
Yeah,
or like Twitch these days.
I did try
Yeah.
it with damage on. I lasted about 4 laps, and so I was like, yeah, no, that's not happening. So I took damage off and then tried again.
Fair enough.
My highest online score in a game ever was on Monaco, though. But that's because I set it on the hardest difficulty setting, took all assists off, started the race, hit pause, and let the AI take over.
Doing
100 brain plays.
It's just pootling around, people ramming into it, getting penalties left, right, and centre. Ended up finishing like 4th or something with against all the online people, and ended up getting an amazing score. So yeah, that's a nice little cheat if you want to do that.
That's what sort of like what I used to do on a PS1 F1 game, where like just as soon as you're on a long straight, turn off auto drive, and as soon as it gets to the corner or braking zone, put like auto driving back on. So like basically I was just accelerating and then pressing pause.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
worked.
I know what you mean. Yeah, I have done it on a few online races before. Like you'd go through the opening start phase and then pause it just so no one crashes into you, because then you'd go translucent for about 5 seconds. Everyone will crash through you, get through Eau Rouge or whatever, and then once you're on the Kemble Straight, you can then unpause it and then carry on, and then you kind of survive the first few corners. Then that's the way to do it.
And then just be wary whenever you go into a heavy braking zone of whoever's behind you.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you saw someone on the esports scene try that?
Well, someone did. Daniel App did, didn't he? He got a professional sim racer to take over from him,
Yeah, he did.
and then he got fired.
And he got sacked. Wasn't that from his own team? Or
Yeah,
like
it
his
was.
dad's team?
It was Audi, I think. But I think
Yeah.
Audi were looking for an excuse to get rid of him anyway, so they weren't going to renew his contract. But
Yeah, and they booted him out.
yeah, it's like, oh, good, we've got an excuse to get rid of him now.
Excellent. Did they pull out a Formula E end of this season, or
It was
was that BMW?
Yeah, BMW pulled out, and I think there was one other pulled out. I think it was Audi. And then
Yeah,
Mercedes-
BMW pull out more often than as much as Honda do.
Yeah, I thought you were going to go somewhere else there.
I was expecting somewhere else.
No. It popped up
Not
in my
on
head,
YouTube.
but I was like, no, that's not where I want it to go. That's not what.
Yeah, no, BMW did. Audi and Mercedes are pulling out the end of next year as well.
It's a shame. I think Mercedes could do a real good job there, like branding wise.
Well, well, they have. But they weirdly they pulled out to focus on F1. So yeah, it's kind
They
of
just want to win
It's
more.
almost like, they're not doing well in F1 and they
Yeah.
need to divert all their resources.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly thought like Mercedes EQ was going to be the future of Mercedes motorsport, and I thought they would sell off parts of the Mercedes brand to Ineos and Toto Wolff, and then you get Ineos Wolf Racing or whatever they wanted to call it. Mercedes would just be a power unit supplier to teams, and then Mercedes EQ would be the focus for what they were trying to do with their road cars. But no, I don't know if they know something that we don't. I don't know if there's been any, like, if they've got any breakthroughs with hydrogen or anything like that. Because, I mean, I know hydrogen cars are basically electric cars anyway, but it depends if they're doing, like, hydrogen fuel cell or hydrogen combustion. Hydrogen combustion's a long way off being ready for road cars, I think.
Yeah. Although Ineos Wolf Racing has a nice ring to it.
It does, yeah.
I'd quite like to see that. Mercedes B team.
Yeah. Can you imagine Toto Wolff being part of a B team? I can't.
No. He'd be like subletting it to someone else.
Yeah.
Lewis Hamilton would be team principal of it because by that point he'd retire.
Yeah. Well, he's already team principal of X44 in Extreme E, isn't he?
Yeah.
Not that he's attended any races, but,
Too busy in the music studio to do that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think we can call the stream there.
Yep.
There's not really much more
I think we've covered everything.
to discuss, and we've covered everything that I've seen. So, yeah, thank you very much for Antocatch and Everady Motorsport for joining us in the comment section. It was nice having someone there.
Yeah, thank you.
And we hope that you tune in for our coverage, our reaction to the qualifying and race sessions of the US Grand Prix, whatever time they may be, because we don't know yet either.